70% of everything we do every day is habitual. That's our behaviours, our thoughts, our belief systems, our reactions to things. I had to find my own closure without him, which is often also a thing in grief. Everything triggered me. Everything reminded me of him, and every memory of him sent me into a panic attack. And so when that's on overdrive, that's why we lose all our habits, because we are so emotionally, so caught up in survival that nothing is normal anymore.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Good Grief. Today, we are joined by special guest and my longtime friend, Dr. Gina Cleo. Welcome.
Welcome.
Thanks for being here.
Me. Great to be here, guys. Good to see you again.
I know. It's been a few years.
Thank you very much. It's been a few years.
Has it
It only
been?
takes a podcast and a book to bring good people together
It's
again.
true. And we live in the same suburb.
We live in the same
What
suburb.
in the world?
Literally.
Oh my goodness.
We thought we were here longer than you, but we were so wrong.
You are guests in this suburb.
Yeah.
We have much to learn from you.
You do.
It's great to see you. It's great to have you here. Congratulations. This is a big week
Yes.
for you.
Thank you.
And thanks for fitting us in, to be
Yeah,
Oh,
honest.
of course. What a pleasure to be here with you guys. Thank you.
We're so honoured.
And we're here to talk about all things habits and grief, because
Yes.
there's those two things come into lot.
Intertwined.
Sure do. Yeah.
But can I do the honor of introducing you, because formally
Of course.
as Dr. Gina Cleo, because for our listeners who may not know who you are, I just want to make sure that they know who we've got in the room today.
Oh, please.
Because we've been waiting for this episode.
Yes.
And like the fact that you had a slot out of hundreds of interviews and calls and podcasts,
True.
and that you're in our suburb and not in Sydney or somewhere else. So would you allow me, so you don't have to brag
Please
about
do.
yourself?
Yeah, please do. I would not brag anyway, so
Please.
Okay.
over to you.
For everybody listening, we've got in the room Dr. Gina Cleo, who has a degree in biomedical science, a master's degree in nutrition and dietetics, a doctorate in habit change, and then went on to become a habit researcher, has been interviewed by more than 200 media organizations around the world, has the Habit Change Institute, and has just released the Habit Revolution, which we have in our hands. Welcome a
shiny.
second time.
So pretty.
But we're stoked to have you here, and also because we love habits.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
we talk about this stuff all the time, and we're here to learn ourselves.
Oh, awesome.
Yes.
Love it.
So tell us, just how has the week been launching the book?
Oh my gosh. Wild, so wild. There has been just so much engagement and interest in the book. And, from the moment it landed on shelves, I think within a few hours, people were messaging me like, I'm already on chapter 3. I can't wait to get through this, or
Can't put this down.
I can't put this down. And the book was sent to a bunch of journalists before it was launched, the ones that requested for it. And it's just been amazing. I've been in tears in some interviews where people there's just been people who I didn't expect would really take it, like say older men, for
Sure.
example, who would probably not be my target market, but they have just been all about it, like biggest fans. And so from the whole spectrum it's been incredible, honestly. I'm so overwhelmed by it all. I'm like, guys, I just put some words on a paper.
Yeah.
You're an author now.
Yeah.
First book.
Wow.
First book.
And
last.
You were a labor of love, hey? Pretty big one.
Guys, get the book. This could be the last.
I know. After writing my PhD thesis, I was like, that's it. My writing days are done. I'm
Seriously.
good. And then my agent was like, you have a book in you. I'm like, I don't know. And then she was like, you have a book in you. I'm like, okay.
Now, I'm pretty naive. Which one has more words, PhD or this book?
PhD.
It does.
Yeah,
Oh my
for
gosh.
sure.
What's the difference?
So a PhD, I think, was 100,000 words. This one was 60,000 words. But with a PhD, you have to do all the science and then write about it. So it's not just like research. You actually have to implement the stuff.
Yeah.
So that took 4 years. This
Wow.
took about a year.
But you'd
also my
already
life's work.
done the work.
I had. Yeah, this is true. So
Super.
actually my whole life.
Crazy. And it's in stores
It is.
everywhere, like literally. When they were telling you there was only a 30% chance or 30%.
30% uptake.
Take up.
Yeah.
Uptake.
Yeah. And then we ended up getting 100%. So they were like, look, only 30% of stores that we pitched to will take it. And I was just happy with that.
So if you're in an airport
That
right
is
now,
wild.
yeah, grab the
Guys,
book.
go grab it. If you're
Get your hand on this.
Target, Kmart, Big W,
Habit Revolution.
any bookstore, right
Yeah.
here.
It is hot off the press, legit.
Yeah, it nearly sold out yesterday at one of the shops down in Ravina. Yeah.
that is
Our
so
local-
cool.
Yeah.
So cool.
I love that. And you haven't purchased a copy yet. When I released our album, we went and bought albums in every store we could find.
Did you? Oh my gosh, that is adorable.
Yeah. So
Well, they give you 10 copies, I think, as the author.
Right.
And then I've got to buy the rest. So once I get through my 10 copies, I've given one to like my mum, one was like my Kris Kringle.
how was that? Giving a
Christmas.
book to your mum?
Oh, it was so special. I gave them the first one that I'd opened,
Yeah.
my mum and dad. And, you know, my dad has wanted me to write a book his whole life. So
Whoa.
it was such a beautiful moment. Like he teared up and I wrote their names in it and he just couldn't believe that, you know, my name was on a book that he could hold.
That is amazing.
But then straight away he was like, all right, when's the TV show coming? I'm like, Dad, just be happy with this. Gosh, relax, man.
Parents.
I know, right?
So cool. Well, one thing I love that you mentioned pretty early on in the book is that you help people live a life by design and not by default.
Yeah.
Tell us what does that mean to you? How does that outwork in your daily life? Has that been before you started researching? You've always felt that, or did it come as you started digging into things? And
70% of everything we do every day is habitual. That's our behaviours, our thoughts, our belief systems, our reactions to things. So actually, most of the time, we're in autopilot. And we're not doing things necessarily because they're serving us or because they're the best things for us. We're just doing them because that's what we've always done. And I guess it got to a point where, you know, I was working as a dietitian and I was helping people with their lifestyle changes, but then they'd come back and they'd just have the same routines that they were doing before. So I'm like, we don't have a knowledge deficit. I think we have a behavioral change problem. And we aren't taught about habits anywhere, you know. And when I first started researching habits, they'd only been researched for like 10 years. It was such a new area. There's only 2 habit researchers in Australia, even now.
wow.
Yeah, and I was like, well, I need more answers. I need to understand how to actually help people break out of, I guess, the shackles of these very comfortable routines we get in. Because change is uncomfortable. Our brains don't really like change. So I wanted to, I had this idea of how do I wake up and do something different and make that easy without being stuck in the rut of what I normally do or what I always do. How do I actually create a life by design? Like I want to do this, it's the lifestyle I want, rather than, like the rut that I've been in. And that's why I'm fascinated with neuroscience and the
Love
study of
that.
the brain.
I think when you said habits have only been around or studied for 10 years, I reckon it's been such a throwaway word. Like we know words
So
like
true.
routines
Yeah.
and goals and so forth, but
Yeah.
we don't think about that. And you said 70% of our lives. Since I've
Yeah.
started reading your book,
Yeah.
I've started realizing how much stuff
Yeah.
is by habits.
And you can never unknow
Oh
it.
my
So
gosh.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Tell me, what kind of stuff are you noticing?
Oh, everything. This morning, like, getting into the shower.
Yep.
I turn the water on first, put my towel over,
Yeah.
you know, and that's my
The
ordered.
sequence in which we
Oh.
dry ourselves
Yep.
each time.
How you brush your
and-
teeth,
100%.
everything's the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Recently, I've tried brushing my teeth with the opposite hand.
Nice. Good
Yeah.
for your brain doing
It's been
that.
very hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. But now
It feels
almost.
so awkward.
Yeah. Now almost the other hand feels a little bit awkward.
So
and I
interesting.
like that.
Yeah. How long have you been doing that?
About a month.
Okay.
I saw an Instagram reel. And someone was like, if you do this, if
Wisdom.
you look at yourself and smile and you do something else, you know, your life will change. I'm like, all right,
Cool.
I'll give that experiment
All right.
a go.
Nice.
Well, when I was playing soccer back in high school, obviously most people are a right footer.
Mm.
I specifically wanted to be able to kick with my left foot as well. So
Ooh.
I did the same things.
Huh.
The toothbrush thing. I
So
was like, I
competitive,
want
this
it.
one.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm going to kick your butt with my left foot.
But I think like, you know, obviously for everyone tuning in to this episode, most people have lost someone, a pet, a relationship, you know, there's also job loss and that changes everything that we do
Oh, yeah.
big time. Like all of our habits get thrown out the window, which is why I resonated so
Yeah.
deeply with some of the things you've shared early in the book. Can you tell us a bit about your story?
Yeah.
And I just know it's going to connect with so many of our listeners.
Yeah, yeah.
and we can dive into that a little.
Yeah, sure. All right. I'll give you the story, but like I said, if you want more detail, just like dig into more. So oh God, where do I start? So when I was doing my PhD, my PhD in habits.
Well, let's back up.
Oh, wow. We're going deeper now.
Yeah, we need to back up.
Okay.
Because we got some Japanese in the room, but we got some Egyptian in the room as well. Let's go. We want to know about Gina.
Oh, me?
Yeah. Tell us
story.
a little bit about your, who you are.
Oh, okay. So I was born in Egypt.
That is the coolest.
Cool already, like that.
I lived there for 8 years, and then I moved to New Zealand, and I was there for 8 years, and then my family came to the Gold Coast for a holiday, and we were like, why would you leave?
Totally.
So here we are.
Amen.
Since
paradise.
then. So I was 16 when we moved here. Both my parents had type 2 diabetes and heart disease, which is what inspired me to become a dietitian. But I also had disordered eating, which I wasn't willing to admit to myself at the time. I was like, this is just a diet gone wrong. Like, I just have no discipline. Like, it's fine. But actually, I had a full-blown like eating disorder, disordered eating, probably both. And I became a dietitian probably as a journey of self-discovery and also to help my grandparents and others. And so I've always been someone who I'm a very curious person. My mum's always like, you're so going to be a scientist, because I used to be like, and why, like about all the things. Mm-hmm. So I guess my journey in research and science started with that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. And then it went more into, well, why do we do what we do? Why is it that I say to myself, I'm going to wake up and exercise, and I end up scrolling on Facebook Marketplace for 2 hours? Like, why?
Oh, I've never done that.
Are you guilty of this?
Gina.
Yeah.
I go through seasons.
Can relate.
Marketplace is a rabbit hole. It's a
Isn't
vortex.
it? And I'm not even looking for anything specific. I'm just like, what's in the
What's
area?
on
Why? Yeah. So there's that. And then there's also, why is it that some people have, this willpower to be able to do certain things, to be able to pull themselves out of ruts, and other people don't? Like, what is the ingredient and how can I harness it? So that sort of started my fascination with the idea of studying sustainable change and long-term outcomes. And when I started my PhD, I had no idea what I was looking for. I was just wanting to understand more about why we do what we do and how to change it. And I found that every single article I read pointed to the fact that habits are the only proven method to long-term outcomes. And I'm like, why are we not implementing this?
Yeah.
Why is it not talked about in school?
Yeah.
Like,
Seriously.
There's so many of
There
those
should be
things.
a whole subject in school about this.
Totally. And to your point before, Ryan, like the words habits, behaviors, rituals, and routines are used interchangeably. Mm-hmm. So we think we know what we're talking about with habits, but they're actually all very different things.
Right.
So when we talk about habits, it's the way we change our habits is an entirely different mechanic and sequence to changing our behaviors or routines.
Okay. So you've just opened up a whole can of worms. So just what is the difference? I mean, we're probably going to jump around, but we need to understand what is a habit and what is a behavior if we're going to understand this conversation or learn from it.
Good one, true. So a behavior is something that you do intentionally with deliberation, with some sort of planning, even if you plan it just beforehand. So it's like, I'm deciding to go from A to B and I'm going to go this way, or I'm going to make this for dinner. Like, it's a thought, it's a conscious thought. A habit, on the other hand, is a behavior that you've done consistently that your brain has now gone, well, I don't need to think about this consciously anymore. So I'm going to put it in the automated part of my brain. So it's a behavior or a thought or action that's subconscious, mindless, automatic, and it's triggered. So what I mean by triggered is all of our habits are triggered by something in our internal or external environment. It could be the time of day, the place you're in, what you've just done beforehand.
Could be a smell.
Could be
a sound,
an emotion, a person that you're around, your social situation. Whereas behaviors aren't triggered. They can be spontaneous. They can be instant at any time. And the difference might be someone who, say, exercises at random times and they do different exercises on different days. And it's like just a thought. I'm like, I'll go out for a walk. That's a behavior. A habitual exerciser would be someone who exercises at similar times of the day or does the same thing or does it quite mindlessly. Like they're halfway through it and they're like, I'm exercising. That's the difference.
Very interesting. You've just unraveled
Even more.
all of these things that you
Now
hear.
think about us. What are we doing?
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
different types of behavioral science and so forth. Yesterday I couldn't even say behavioral.
Yeah.
Am I-
Behavioral.
yeah.
It's a hard word.
Behave real.
I couldn't even
I
say
don't
it.
even know what he was saying, and I was like, what are you?
Right. So yeah, maybe we won't go down that rabbit hole. I'm thinking about all sorts of different behaviors then.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's good to understand.
Yes.
Just to set the tone. We were learning about Gina and
Oh, yes.
and how we arrived here.
Yeah.
And what I find fascinating about you is it's not just not to disqualify. It's not just the science and the research. It's a walked journey as well.
Oh, yeah. Very much so.
And I think that's why there's going to be so much connection for people in this episode.
Yeah.
Would you like to share your story?
Yeah, of course. So when I finished my PhD, my research was picked up by so much media and medical conferences. And I was like, this is going absolutely gangbusters. And I realized that there's actually never in history been like the research I did basically looked at how can we sustain change. And normally we see like this Nike tick in behavior change. So we have, say, like people are doing what they're meant to do, and then the program stops and it's like, whoop, back to where they started. Whereas in my programs, it kept going down. Like they kept doing the things even a year after the study had finished. So I started getting requests from different organizations and companies.
And had that been seen before?
No.
First time.
First
So
time.
full breakthrough.
Wow. Totally.
People continuing and bettering results.
Like a year after the study, they were
Sure.
like, oh, I didn't even realize I was still doing this because it's just like second nature now. It's just part
and
of my life.
your study was a large one on weight loss,
Yeah, it was weight loss maintenance.
which has been looked at and pulled apart for centuries.
In
like,
how many different ways?
biggest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was awesome. And so, yeah, I was getting consulting requests to write programs for different companies, which I did. And that sort of catapulted my career. And I was like, I need to clone myself because I can't do this on my own. So then I started the Habit Change Institute. And it's a train the trainer model. So I have doctors and psychologists and coaches and all sort of allied health or trainers that I teach to become certified habit coaches. And that's been phenomenal. But throughout all of this, I had met who I thought was the man of my dreams. And this was sort of in the second year of my PhD. And
What year are we?
oh God, girl, I don't know.
Say 2014, I think.
I know that I was 27, so it was 10 years ago. Yeah.
Okay.
isn't that crazy? Yeah.
How did you know that? 2014.
I read something.
There you go. I couldn't even remember that. It was 2014. Met this guy, and it was just like instant chemistry. And I was like, oh, I'm in trouble here. And we were together for 6 years. And in the last 6 months of our relationship, we got married. But in the year before, sort of in the last year of our relationship, things just didn't feel right. And it was during COVID as well. It was 2020 at the time. And his work was impacted. He couldn't see his family who lived interstate. And so whenever I'd say to him, like, hey, what's going on? I feel really disconnected. It would come down to, I'm feeling depressed. He'd say, I'm feeling depressed, or, I really miss my family, or my work's like different. And it was all masked under this, we're okay, but I'm just going through something and I need your support. So that's what I did. We just powered on with that. And it was awful. I felt like I was becoming like a shriveled raisin where there was no connection or affection or love, but there were lots of words. There were lots of like, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. I can't wait to come home to you. Like lots of affirmations. So I wasn't worried that there was anything sort of going on.
And you said that you were focusing on supporting him no matter what
Exactly.
came out of his mouth.
Yeah.
You were like, okay, I need to be the supportive wife.
Yeah.
Do what I can, make you feel comfortable and all of the
Yeah,
things.
and not exert my needs when you're in a time of being down.
Yeah,
Wow.
put you above me,
Yeah.
what I needed.
Yeah. And like I have the schema, which I didn't know till recently, of being quite self-sacrificial. And I think that's my Egyptian background.
Yeah, wow.
Where like women are more sacrificial than men in that culture. And so there's, I learned a lot about myself, and I would probably have done things maybe differently, but I had to learn it all, right? So at the time, I really parked myself on a shelf. It was to the point where I'd be so down some days that I would spend like 8 hours playing Tetris on my phone.
Wow.
Because I wanted to activate my mind somehow, otherwise I'd go crazy. But I couldn't do anything because I was so anxious. I was just such a mess.
Worried but not trying to worry because
Yeah.
everything's okay.
Yeah, trying to escape reality but not do that as
Mm-hmm.
well. And so I'm like, if I can just keep myself busy doing this, then he'll come home after work and, you know, and maybe I'll just get a glimpse of a smile and we'll be okay for the day.
Because are you an overthinker? Like, I don't know.
not-
In
I'm
your
not
position,
really.
I would have been doing circles in my brain and
I'm a huge truster. So when he'd say, like, I had a hard day at work, that would be it.
Yeah.
You know, I would be like, well, what if this happened? What if this happened? Then he'd say, no, this happened. I'd be like, okay. Like, and that would be the rest of it, right? And also with sort of our attachment styles, I'm more of a secure attachment and he was more like a withdrawn attachment, which basically means when things are going wrong, he wants to like hide in a corner and I kind of want to
Sure.
lean in and chat. So it actually started making me more anxious. It was horrible, but I didn't know what to do. So then there was one particularly difficult day. I remember I just felt extra disconnected from him. So I was like, I'm just going to do some baking because, you know, carbs are definitely going to make me feel better. So I was
more about that later.
Amen.
making banana bread. And I wanted to look up a recipe and his computer happened to be on the kitchen bench. So I just like flicked it open, looked up a recipe. And as I was doing that, these text messages that were linked to his iPhone were popping up live on the screen. And there was a live text message exchange that he was having.
And he was still at home at this stage?
He just left. So he's like, I'm going to go down to Bunnings. So like a tool shop. I'm going to go down to Bunnings. And I was like, okay, no worries. We live on acreage. So he'd often go
It makes
to
sense.
Bunnings.
Yeah.
Yeah, which now I know is code for something else.
Right.
And as he'd left, that's when I started baking and the text messages were a live exchange between him and a prostitute that he was just about to meet with. And it was him asking for her address and a photo. She sent the photo. He responded to the photo like, nice. And then they talked about the financial exchange. And he's like, I'm 5 minutes away. And my world shattered. I couldn't, it's like, I could see this was happening, but I was like, no, this can't actually be happening. But it was happening. And then I quickly scanned the rest of his text messages and computer, and there were hundreds others. And this happened before we were married, which was really difficult for me to understand and still is because we'd only been married for 6 months and this had been going on for at least a year. And it was his idea to get married. You know, I was sort of indifferent about getting married at the time. I wanted to wait till after COVID, but he really wanted to do it quickly. So it shattered my world because I was like, if I was so wrong about this, what else am I wrong about? And it felt like my mind fractured in that moment.
This is where I in the book I just paused because the way you write about this experience is a complete betrayal and on so many levels. But you actually wrote this, and I wanted to read it word for word because to me it just struck like so many chords, even though I've never been through that form of betrayal ever. You said nothing made sense, but then everything made sense at the same time. The more I discovered, the less I could breathe. I felt like I was going crazy. This couldn't be my life story. It just couldn't be. If I couldn't trust what I once knew to be true, how could I trust what would happen tomorrow?
Yeah.
Oh man.
I have
And-
goosebumps.
I'm like sweating up.
Yeah.
You know, in the grief side of things from like losing family and different people, I felt the same things.
Yeah.
But it's such a different experience.
It's so wild when our coherent narrative, what we know, what we've always known, our family's around, like our parents are here. And when that's gone, you're like, well, who am I and how do I fit in the world? And
Question everything.
question everything. Exactly.
It's like we're broken down
Yeah.
to sand again.
Yeah. And it's one thing to not be able to predict our future. It's like we can be okay with ambiguity, but to not be able to know our past and understand our lived experience is total, like your mind is like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to believe.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, I fainted because I hyperventilated and I fainted. And my beautiful dog Macy broke the door and came in and woke me. She's like my angel, I know. And I messaged him and I just said, hey, when will you be home? Actually, I took screenshots of everything and I sent it to my mum for safekeeping. And I was like, don't call me. There's something going on, but I need to just have a conversation about this. And I just messaged him saying, hey, we need to chat when you get home. And so he came, it was like 10 minutes, came home, and I said very calmly, because I'm like, I don't want to scare him away. I said, is there anything that you need to tell me? And whatever you tell me, I just want honesty and we'll work through anything you tell me. I just want to know what's been happening. And he's like, no, I've got nothing to tell you. And I actually remember audio recording
Oh, hell
this.
no.
Yeah,
Oh
right?
my gosh.
I've actually still got the recording on my phone, and I'll tell you why I kept it. But I audio recorded it because I knew that I was in a state of trauma and that my mind wouldn't remember things accurately.
Yeah, wow.
And
So
I don't
good.
know how I came to that in the moment. Like,
Your
it was
PhD's
totally
like
instinctive.
outworking itself.
Yeah, totally right.
Oh.
And so I audio recorded and then I asked him, what about these photos? And I showed him what I'd seen. And he's like, came up with this excuse. He was like, no, I love you way too much. I had the idea of going. And then as soon as I was outside, I was like, I can't do that. I love Gina way too much. And I've come straight home. And I was like, you've been doing that for a whole year? Like, I have Google Map evidence. I've got bank statements. Like,
Yeah.
I've got emails. Like, you can't deny this is happening. And he continued to deny it. So that gaslighting broke my mind even more because I only knew him as this beautiful, kind, loving, melancholic man who adored me. We were trying for a child.
Yeah, we got to meet him. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I've met him multiple times.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah. So
he
go
was
real
a nice
Totally.
guy.
Yep.
You would
Had a great
think-
chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
And like gentle and kind. Like he'd be the guy who'd like stop the car to help someone cross the road, or on his days off, he'd help my dad fix his boat. Like a real giver. And never was that part of his history or that I knew of. So it didn't make any sense. So then it was pretty wild because he just said to me, I'm not worthy of being in the same room as you. And he packed his bags and left. And that was it. And I never got anything from him. And I had to learn that I had to find my own closure without him, which is often also a thing in grief. Like, we can't go to that person and talk to them about it. They could be our best friend, but they can't be there for us anymore. And I really battled with that.
Yeah.
That he was my greatest comfort and my best friend and the one person I did life with. And we were trying for a child and we'd just gotten married and our wedding was magic. We cried in our vows. Like, it was so beautiful. And now this is happening. And it was such a contrast. So I went through, I developed agoraphobia, which is the fear of leaving your own house, which is a trauma response. It had nothing to do with the outside world. It had everything to do with the world is not safe. It's not as I know it or I thought that it would be. And so if it's not safe, I don't know how to exist out there and I just have to stay in here. And everything triggered me. Everything reminded me of him, and every memory of him sent me into a panic attack.
Yeah.
Wild.
Big time. And I related to the car rolling into the driveway, hearing the sound of the stones, smells of coffee, colors of cars.
Yeah.
All those things. I'm going, oh my gosh, it was taking me right back 11 years ago.
Wow.
And going, yeah, it's a trauma response.
Totally.
And you don't know how to deal with it if you've never been through it.
Yeah. And you don't know when it's coming.
Even if, totally.
Like, I remember after going through a lot of exposure therapy, I was finally able to get to the supermarket and I was so proud of myself. And then our wedding song played on the radio.
Oh.
And I completely fell apart. Like, I was dismantled on the floor. And my mum had to come and get me because I honestly I was having a panic attack. And, it wasn't till later in my therapy that I could get myself out of that. But that, it sends you backwards. You think you're doing okay, and then something happens and you're like,
forward,
nope,
two back.
straight back in bed. Like, I can't face the world. So how this sort of unfolded was, well, just like a quick side note. So in the 5 weeks after I found out what had happened, the first 5 weeks were absolute torment because my mind was going through every interaction I'd ever had with him, every message, every time he was out, every time he was late from work, like, and going, was that when that happened? This makes sense why he said that, or all these things were happening. So I developed really bad insomnia. I'd also, at the same time, he was saying to me, I miss you so much. I want this to work together. And
he was texting you still.
Yeah. And I wanted the same. I wanted to be able to work this out together. He was the love of my life.
Yeah.
I adored him so much. Like, it scared me how much I loved this guy. And then after 5 weeks, I dropped in to a tennis match he was playing. Like, I knew it was going to be tennis at the spot, and I just dropped in. He wasn't expecting me. And he just fell into my arms. He was bawling his eyes out, and he just said, I just want to come home. And I was like, I will do this journey with you. Let's go to therapy and let's do this properly. But you have to promise me that if I'm pouring my heart and opening myself to you again, you can't be seeing other women. Like, this cannot be happening. He was like, of course, I haven't dated anyone anyway.
Shouldn't need to be said.
I know, right?
Really. Yeah.
Totally. Okay, 24 hours later.
No.
Yeah. My mum's friend's daughter, who'd never met him, was in Brisbane for like a Christmas party.
It's
she
a
was
small world.
Totally right. She was at the wrong restaurant at the wrong time by accident and saw him.
No way.
With his arms all over this other woman. She took videos and photos and she sent them to my mum.
Oh.
And she was like, I'm pretty sure this is Gina's husband.
So she just knew him from Instagram or
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. And like, she'd never met, she's like literally my mum's friend's daughter. And I got the messages the next morning. And I remember phoning him and being like, you're actually a really horrible person and I don't want anything to do with you. And that was the moment I totally broke because I sort of held on to hope for those 5 weeks. And it was in that moment that I was like,
it?
that's it.
Foot down.
I'm done here.
Wow.
And that was the realization of, oh my God, it's over. My life will never be the same. I've been betrayed on so many levels, but also in his most vulnerable moment. Like, he was bawling his eyes out 24 hours ago. And I said to him how raw I was and how much this was breaking me. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Like, I couldn't go to work. I was a mess. And even in that moment, he was lying to me. So that was really, really horrible. There you go.
I just want to say that, oh my gosh, from that, receiving that news again, I just would have been like, how have I ever trusted any of his emotions? Were our vows real? Was our anything real? When he's bawled his eyes out to me saying, I'm sorry, I want to make this work.
Yeah, exactly.
And then 24 hours later, he's...
Yeah, to be able to express such deep emotion, and such vulnerability when it wasn't actually real. Because I found out this person he was with, he'd actually been seeing regularly.
Wow.
So yeah, it was every level of a complete, because then I lost trust in myself.
Yeah.
I felt estranged from me because I thought I had a pretty good judge of character.
Yeah.
You know,
what's wrong
I
with
knew,
me?
Yeah, I knew my place in the world. I was doing well.
And so then what do we call that on his side?
Sociopathic.
Like someone who lies, continues to do the same behavior or habits or whatever.
It's a pathology. I mean, I don't want to put a label to it, but it's a psychiatric pathology to be able to do that and to do that at the pathological level that he was doing it on. And also the lengths that he went through to hide what he was doing. It's not even something I'm even ready to talk about or don't know if I ever will be able to talk about, because there was an incident that happened that I was like, I'm going to be a victim of domestic violence and that can't be me. And how can this be happening? And it was the lengths he went through to hide his phone and his devices was awful. Yeah. And it wasn't normal. Yeah.
It's stuff they make movies and TV shows about. You know, you don't think it's ever going to happen to me. You know, you never think that.
Never.
Especially when you're on the hope side of life.
Yeah.
You know, and some people have said that, you know, divorce is worse than a death because that person who you no longer want to be with still you have to live with.
Yeah.
Yeah, have you heard that before?
I
Have you
have.
thought through that or what that's like?
Yeah. I can't, I think it would be extremely accurate, especially if you had children with that person, because you have to continue interacting
Yeah.
with the perpetrator in a way, you know, with the person that you can't just fall out of love with. And this was the hard thing, is I still adored him. I didn't want to love him, but I cared deeply about him still. I still had fond feelings towards him, despite the immense pain that he'd caused me and the betrayal that he caused us as a married unit, and the vows that he broke. Like, there was just so many things in it, but I still loved him. And when my friends would say something bad about him, I'd be like, don't say that. Like, I don't want that negativity. You know, he's broken. Like, why would he ruin this life we had, which was beautiful? There's obviously something wrong. So it's really hard because, again, you don't know how to exist in that space where you're like, I love you, I can't be with you, or I've even fallen out of love with you. And that in itself is odd, because you're the person I gave my whole world to. And you're here, but we can't coexist together anymore. And it's constant grief, because you have to continue to make the choice to not be together.
And I think that's where I find that connection. You know, if I think about my dad, I love you, but I can't be with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just a wrestle
Yeah. Big
wrestle
time.
ongoing.
Yeah.
Can we talk about trauma
Yeah.
just for a bit? You said that like it causes a greater fear response.
Yeah.
And then it causes us to lose memory.
Yeah.
And when I read that, I was like, that's what grief brain must be.
Yeah.
Is
Yep.
that the same thing?
It is. Yep. So you have dissociative memory. So in that traumatic moment, your brain's like, this is too much, and it like shuts down memories. You also have a higher activation in your amygdala, which is the emotional part of your brain, and a reduced activation in your prefrontal cortex, which is the logical part of your brain.
Right. So the front, logical.
Yeah.
The rear,
Emotional.
emotional.
And now you've got loads of emotion, not a lot of logic, which is why triggers can also take you back into the moment. Like, you have a trigger and you feel like you're right back in that war
Yeah,
zone
100%.
where you're like, it's happening all over again. And it's not. But if your logical mind was super active, it would help you understand that, but it's not active. And that's the wild thing about any sort of traumatic trigger, is the only thing that's activated is your amygdala, that emotional side. And it feels just as real as if it had just happened the first
Right.
time.
So
I want to know first, is there any research done that we've found that there is something that you can do in these moments to activate a bit more?
Yeah. The
At
only
the
way
front.
to sort of make those two brain systems come together again is through your breath.
wow.
And it's the one thing that can link two brains together. And it's a really powerful tool that I learned. There's other strategies as well. So one of the other strategies that I learned through exposure therapy, oh my goodness,
Yeah,
my
that sounds
therapist
full
was
on.
brutal. Yeah, let
Yeah.
me tell you about
Yeah,
exposure
yeah.
therapy.
We've done a
'cause
bit of
this will
therapy
answer
and a
your
bit of breath
question.
work, but
Yeah.
exposure therapy sounds like
Wild.
another level.
Yeah.
Wild. Okay, deep breath. So what my psychologist would do is she would bring up a traumatic trigger for me. And I had to do exposure therapy because I literally couldn't leave my house. Like literally any sort of black car, or like there's hundreds of things triggered me. And so I became this terrified woman. And I was like, I need to be able to function in this world. And so exposure therapy I did extremely intensely. I don't recommend this, but I do
Tell us
recommend
exactly
doing
what
it.
it is.
Okay, so what happens is the psychologist will bring up a trauma trigger. So say for you, it's the color red. And you think about the color red and you get the trauma response. So your heart rate goes up, your palms are sweaty, your stomach's in knots, and you're hyperventilating. So you're really in that trigger response. And then the idea is to then let the thought go. So get rid of the red color, and then you focus on your body. So that somatic response. So you're like, you can even explain out loud, my stomach's in knots, my hands are sweaty, I'm struggling to breathe, like, and only focus on that. And then it de-escalates you because now your mind is focusing on your body, not the traumatic experience.
Right.
And what it does in time is it starts to rewire your brain to say, okay, I saw the red and I'm still alive. Like, I'm actually
I've
okay
survived.
now. I've survived it.
Yeah.
And actually 10 minutes later, I'm totally calm. So maybe it's not going to kill me, because trigger responses are fight or flight.
Sure.
Your body's literally saying to you, there's a risk here that you could die. And that's why it feels so heightened. And so I did that.
It sounds easier said than done.
Well, wait for it though, because, okay, the first time that she'd de-escalate me from a trigger response, it took about 15 minutes of like full on like hyperventilating, like trying to de-escalate. And then as soon as I was like, okay, I'm good now, she's like, we're going again. I was like, homegirl, I'm gonna need a minute.
It's like a personal training session.
Hang on a second. I didn't pay you to put me through the ringer.
Yeah, I was like, I just need some time to like, whoa, get over. Like that was a lot. And she's like, you don't get to
that's
choose
not how it works.
how many triggers are out in that world. We're going again.
Wow.
Right.
And I'd get straight back into that trauma response. And then I noticed the next time would take me 10 minutes to de-escalate, then 5 minutes. And then at the end of the hour we were together, it would be milliseconds. And I'd be like, I can do that now.
That's incredible.
You can bring up the color red all you want and I'm perfectly okay. But I would have to spend an hour doing this for like every trigger.
Wow.
So I had to work through all of them and they got progressively more challenging. So we started with sort of smaller triggers and then we actually got to the point where I drove and I parked in a brothel that he had been to.
Whoa.
And I visualized him walking in, doing his thing, walking out, coming home and telling me he loves me without having this huge heart flutter. And I was like, now I'm healed.
So that was the height.
Yeah,
that
that
you
was
had to get to.
So, because I had to drive past this place to get to work. And I would try and I'd be like, I can't, and I'd have panic attacks in my car and drive straight home. And then everything about that triggered me. Like every time I'd see a neon light or a woman of Asian descent, because he would always pick, Southeast Asian women. And
which would really ruin and taint your view on the world.
Totally.
Because how can you go back to Japan? And, how can you
any country.
get in an Uber car that's black? So many things.
Yeah,
That's
completely.
That's
I remember
absolutely
you
incredible.
texting me and telling me that you just didn't trust the world anymore. You just didn't know what to trust.
Yeah. Because what do you, like when you trust now, you have a foundation of trust. You're like, no, I understand body language or tone. And I've been in the world long enough to know how things work. And like that place really is a massage therapist place. Like we're good. And then when you learn that it's not, you're like, oh, that's not right. And his facial expressions didn't actually mean anything. And my instinct didn't.
I got it wrong.
I got everything wrong.
Totally.
When my mind fractured with that thought, I got it wrong. It was like, what else am I wrong about?
Totally.
And then I remember sitting my parents down and being like, prove to me you're my parents. I need to see a birth certificate. And who says we need to brush our teeth every day? Like, how do I know that's actually meant to be what we do? And how do I know the sky's even blue? How do I know it's not a reflection of the ocean and someone's tricking us? Like, it messed me, man. Like, I was not okay. And so I was bedridden. Which blew my mind because I had a very successful career. I'd just done this awesome like SBS documentary with Michael Mosley, which I was so proud of. And then a month later, I was bedridden, not even knowing if I should brush my teeth or not.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to drive anymore. Like everything fell apart. You know how you were talking before about your morning routine and you notice the sequence in which you do things? That routine is part of your habitual brain, which sits in the emotion side. It sits in the amygdala. And so when that's on overdrive, that's why we lose all our habits, because we are so emotional, we're so caught up in survival that nothing is normal anymore. So I lost my daily routines, my ability to get up, know where my toothbrush was and know what I'm doing and then have a shower and get dressed. Nothing was normal. Nothing was safe. So
Things
I
that you
just didn't know
usually
what to
do automatically.
Yeah, I lost all of that.
And so how long did that go on for?
Oh, it was a process of 2 steps forward, 1 step back with it. I remember my best friend, when I told her as soon as I found out. She was quite pregnant like you, and she flew up from Melbourne on a 1-way ticket, called her husband on the way to the airport, and she was like, I might be having this baby in Queensland.
Wow.
And she came and lived with me for as long as I needed.
Everyone needs a friend like that.
Yeah.
She was phenomenal. And then my mum did the same when they tag teamed, but she helped me a lot. She forced me to go to the beach, be in nature, take Macy for walks, eat something. She took me to the doctor because I had to get tests. I had to get sleeping medications. I had to get a bunch of blood tests and stuff done to make sure that I was safe and I was okay. And I couldn't do that because I couldn't leave the house. So she helped me, and that exposure helped me. But I would say it took about 2 months for me to go from bedridden to a place where I could go to the shops by myself and be able to come home and it not completely derail me. Yeah.
Wow.
So can we talk then about those baby steps?
Yeah.
So you talk about the process of a habit. Can you break that down for everybody?
Yeah.
Because I think, like, I know about habits. I know about
You know what a
habits.
habit is.
And then when I go, oh wow, so it takes these 3 steps
Yeah.
in a certain process to build one.
Yeah.
Makes sense now why some stick, some don't, and why others are easy and others, aren't.
Yeah.
Can you break that process
Yeah.
down? Hey, I hope you've been loving the conversation with Dr. Gina so far. I know we have.
Yes.
There is so much juice left to squeeze, so we've hit pause on this conversation for now.
Yeah, we have. And there's so much more to come. So if you've been loving this and if you found it helpful, please just share it with someone right now, because we're going to bring you part 2 in our next episode. So stick around and do share.
Which won't be long. We'll see you on the next episode. Until then, bye for now.
Ciao.